Breaking news is shaking the Bigfoot community tonight. Former Finding Bigfoot investigator James "Bobo" Fay has stepped forward with a horrifying confession about footage that was never allowed to air, a creature he says was not Sasquatch, and a terrifying government encounter that left him unable to sleep for years. He claims there's a reason the show ended, a reason they were forced to remain silent, and tonight he's finally telling the story they tried to bury. Before we go any deeper, make sure you subscribe, because what he says next may never be televised again. Long before millions knew him as the towering, easygoing investigator from Finding Bigfoot, James "Bobo" Fay was simply the strange kid who never stopped listening to the woods. Born along the fog-choked coastlines of California, he grew up breathing salt air and cedar musk, spending more nights outside than in his own bedroom. Locals say he was always drawn to the places adults warned children not to go. Abandoned logging roads, forgotten elk trails, the dark corridors between redwoods where sunlight never quite reached the ground. While other kids traded baseball cards, Bobo collected cast-off hoofprints, strands of coarse hair, and recordings of screams that rattled through the branches at 3 a.m. It started early. At 9 years old, he woke his parents to tell them he saw something tall walking just beyond the fence line. They dismissed it as a dream, but the next morning, the fence posts were bent inward, like something had pushed its way into their yard instead of out. When Bobo tried to talk about it at school, teachers wrote it off as attention-seeking, but other kids whispered around him, he saw it too. He's not lying. Their parents focused instead on the teeth marks found on livestock, the trees peeled bare 8 and 9 feet above the ground. Something was prowling the coastline, something huge. By 13, Bobo was volunteering on fishing boats, not because he loved fishing, but because he loved what he heard offshore. Echoes, moans, something knocking wood against rock in patterns that felt intentional. He filled cheap cassettes with those sounds and played them back late at night, staring at the ceiling, trying to decipher rhythms that felt like messages. His parents found the tapes and nearly threw them away, but Bobo begged them to stop. He wasn't just collecting weird noises. He was studying something. He grew into a reputation, not as a troublemaker, but as the one you talk to if you see something you can't explain. Hunters approached him with trembling hands, describing shapes bigger than elk, running silently on 2 legs. Hikers described feeling watched for miles. Some turned around only to see nothing behind them, but branches swayed like something tall had just moved. It didn't scare Bobo, not then. Instead, it fascinated him. He believed he was glimpsing a mystery most ignored. But looking back now, he admits something chilling. I wasn't just chasing them, they were watching me grow up. By the time Finding Bigfoot came knocking, Bobo wasn't just a believer, he was a walking database of every strange footprint, guttural howl, and missing livestock report across the Pacific Northwest. Producers were drawn to him because he wasn't theatrical. His excitement came from the kind of curiosity most people lose as adults. They wanted authenticity, and Bobo was authenticity. But from the moment filming began, something felt off. Before the first investigation, the cast was handed a binder titled Safety Protocol. Inside were rules that no one on the team remembered ever requesting. They weren't about bears or dehydration. They were about patterns. Never knock on trees more than 3 times in a row. Never play recorded vocalizations past 2:45 a.m. Never stand alone in clearings during full moons. And, strangest of all, never acknowledge echoes that come from more than one direction at once. When the team questioned the rules, producers brushed them aside. Standard guidelines. Legal stuff. Bobo didn't buy it. As filming progressed, he noticed subtle discomfort among veteran crew. Camera operators refused to look at tree lines through viewfinders for too long. Audio techs asked to leave early whenever the forest went completely silent. The kind of silence that swallows breath and squeezes the air from your lungs. Even their medic admitted something unsettling. More crew suffered suffered migraines and nosebleeds in the woods than on any other outdoor production he'd worked. Then came the problem with footsteps. In several early episodes, Bobo and the team heard bipedal footsteps pacing them from the dark. The rhythm was human, but the distance between steps was outrageous, 8 to 9 feet apart. When they tried to chase the sound, the steps would suddenly vanish, mid-stride, as if something stepped into nothing. Night after night, the footsteps circled them, always stopping just behind Bobo. He started turning around quickly, trying to catch something in peripheral vision. Sometimes he thought he saw a shoulder, sometimes eyes reflecting back. Producers encouraged him to push deeper. He enjoyed the attention, the travel, the thrill, until he noticed the patterns returning. Spiral bark stripping on trees, deer carcasses laid neatly side by side, missing bones. The same clicking noises he recorded as a child now echoed in forests hundreds of miles away. During a late-night campfire interview, Bobo slipped and mentioned those clicks. The director immediately cut the camera. 5 minutes later, the line was removed from the script entirely. Off-camera, a producer leaned in and whispered, "Don't talk about the clicks. Not on television." Bobo didn't understand. Not yet. All he knew was that suddenly he wasn't sure if they were hunting something or if it had been waiting for them to come back. The turning point happened in Washington state, deep inside an overgrown logging road that hadn't seen a truck in 20 years. Locals refused to guide them. One old man at a diner simply said, "Things out there, don't forget faces," and left half his coffee behind. That should have been the first sign to turn around, but it wasn't. The production schedule demanded content, and the crew trudged deeper beneath dripping pines where daylight died early. Their plan was simple: record knocks, mimic suspected calls, and wait. Bobo volunteered to be the one to vocalize. He stepped forward, inhaled, and let out a booming, trademark howl that echoed for miles. The forest answered, not with an animal cry, but with a perfect imitation of his voice, bouncing from 3 different directions at once. The crew froze. Bobo's eyes widened. He tried again, a different pitch. The same mocking reply came back, slightly delayed, like something was studying his vocal cords. The sound technician swore he saw branches sway in the opposite direction of the echo, as if something was circling them silently. Infrared cameras picked up heat signatures, tall shapes, too wide at the shoulders, bending at angles that looked painful. One silhouette crawled vertically up a tree, joints rotating like a spider's legs. The director ordered the team to keep filming. This was gold, but no one felt like celebrating. Then came the whisper. Bobo leaned in. His microphone caught faint syllables just behind his neck, his own voice whispering back to him, "Don't turn around." His body went cold. He spun anyway. Nothing. Just darkness so thick it felt physical. The forest grew quiet. Birds stopped. Wind choked out. And then something started knocking on trees. Slow, rhythmic, and close. Cameras turned, but found no source. The knocks accelerated, circling like a predator tightening a noose. One cameraman vomited from the pressure in his skull. Another began bleeding from the nose. Suddenly, the forest spoke. Rapid clicking, layered with low growls, forming patterns like language. Bobo whispered, "That's not Bigfoot. That's something else." The footage showed their tent shaking from outside that night. Hands, too many joints, too long, pressed against the fabric, feeling their way across the seams. The shadows didn't move like animals. They moved like things that studied anatomy and tried to impersonate it. By morning, trees surrounding their camp were stripped in spirals, and someone or something had left bare footprints around Bobo's sleeping mat. Bare, human-shaped, but each foot had 6 toes. That episode never aired, and the network didn't just delete it, they classified it. After the Washington incident, the production changed. Crew members who once joked around the fire now whispered among themselves, eyes darting to tree lines between takes. The medic complained about a new, constant ringing in his ears. The sound operator developed migraines so sharp they sent him to his knees. When producers suggested bringing in replacements, both men refused to leave the show. "They know my voice now," the sound operator muttered. The next filming location was a state forest no longer listed on government maps. When Bobo asked why, a local ranger replied, "Because too many things go missing there." At first he assumed she meant animals, until she clarified, campers, hunters, rangers, anyone alone after midnight. During the investigation, Bobo noticed quiet zones in the terrain, pockets of absolute silence where insects would not enter. Within those zones, the soil was churned into circular depressions, as if something moved just beneath the surface. They filmed everything. That night, the team heard gravel footsteps outside base camp, scraping, dragging, then the distinct sound of something stepping onto exposed roots. They shined lights. No eyeshine reflected back, but the trees themselves seemed to lean ever so slightly, as if something tall pressed against them while passing through. At dawn, the camp perimeter was littered with pine needles arranged into spirals again. Only this time, in the center of each spiral sat a single strip of torn cloth, the kind used on ranger uniforms. 2 crew members quit on the spot. When the team reviewed motion-triggered wildlife cameras, nearly half the night was missing, corrupted. But what remained showed something horrifying, a shadow stretching across the forest floor, impossibly long, bending at 3 different angles as it moved. No footsteps, no cadence, just the slithering silence of elongated limbs. Producers ordered the footage destroyed. Bobo protested. He argued that viewers deserved the truth. The lead producer pulled him aside and said quietly, "You think Bigfoot is the mystery? Bigfoot is the decoy." The forest didn't scare Bobo anymore. It was the patterns. Patterns imply intelligence, patterns imply hunger. And whatever walked through those trees vanished without leaving tracks. Because sometimes the ground doesn't matter when you're not entirely touching it. The call came from a frantic shipping manager in Northern California. For weeks, security guards patrolling an abandoned warehouse swore something tall was slipping between the loading docks at night, tripping alarms and leaving behind piles of shredded cardboard, not chewed, peeled, like something was stripping the material to examine its fibers. Producers jumped on it. The team arrived expecting raccoons. Instead, they found the building's security office lined with monitors showing nothing. Every time a camera picked up movement, the feed blurred, then snapped back to clarity after the motion passed. The guards insisted they saw the shape with their own eyes. 9, maybe 10 feet tall, with arms that nearly reached the ground. The crew ran a nighttime lockdown. Bobo moved through the aisles with a FLIR camera, the kind that paints heat signatures like ghosts. Halfway down the corridor, the screen flickered. A tall, humanoid silhouette stood motionless between 2 pallets. Its body temperature was colder than the room. When Bobo leaned closer, the silhouette split, dividing into 2 smaller forms that scuttled in opposite directions, limbs bending sideways at the elbow, like insects, mimicking human structure. Audio captured a strange clicking dialect, layered, overlapping, too fast for a single throat. The sound tech whispered, "That's not language, that's measurement." Something was mapping the room. The crew panicked. Cameras shook. One runner tripped and screamed when something brushed past him. Not fur, but hard, like smooth bone. When they regrouped and reviewed the footage in the hallway, a pair of headlights flooded the building. Black windbreaker uniforms stepped out, badges without agency labels. No one smiled, no one blinked. They demanded the tapes. A producer tried to protest, but one of the windbreakers replied, "Unauthorized cryptid footage interferes with ongoing studies." He said it calmly, like reading a weather report. The crew was forced to sign temporary non-disclosure forms on the hood of an unmarked SUV. Bobo refused. He held onto a single SD card he'd palmed during the chaos, tucking it into his sock. The card contained 5 seconds of footage, the tall silhouette splitting into 2. When he watched it later, alone in a hotel bathroom, he noticed something the others hadn't. Both figures paused and turned toward the camera at the exact same time. No breathing, no sway, just stillness and recognition. Before the episode could be edited, the network pulled the entire investigation, citing technical issues. Officially, it never happened. But Bobo saw the truth in that grainy footage. They weren't just hiding in forests anymore. They were walking indoors and learning human spaces. A week after the warehouse incident, Bobo returned home to the fog-drenched coast he'd always trusted. He thought distance would bring clarity. Instead, the silence felt watched. He began noticing small things first. Gravel disturbed near his porch, coastal crows avoiding his property, and, most unsettling, pine needles arranged in subtle spirals beneath his windowsill. He tried to reason it away, but spirals were patterns, and patterns weren't accidental. One evening, just after sundown, someone knocked on his door, not loudly, just once. A gentle, single rap, like a courtesy before a warning. Bobo answered, expecting a neighbor. Instead, a tall man in a charcoal windbreaker stood on the steps, hands folded, features forgettable. The kind of face you lose immediately after seeing. He smelled like cold metal. He didn't introduce himself. He simply said, "You have something that doesn't belong to you." His voice was steady, emotionless. Bobo felt an instinctive urge to slam the door. Before he could, the man added, "The footage." Bobo froze. He hadn't told anyone about the SD card. The man stepped forward, uninvited, eyes scanning the living room. Not curious, just confirming. He spoke in clipped phrases, like reading internal memos aloud. He said the creatures seen in the warehouse were not wild animals, nor cryptids. They were part of an observational anomaly, a term too clinical to comprehend. When Bobo asked if they were aliens, the man shook his head. "Not foreign," he whispered. "Local." He explained that the government's role wasn't containment, it was avoidance. They didn't want to stop the things. They wanted to make sure no one noticed them exist. Bobo asked the question that had haunted him since childhood. Why spirals? The man paused, eyes tightening, and replied, "Because spirals are how they remember. It's their version of handwriting." Before leaving, he leaned in and spoke softly, almost delicately, as if trying not to agitate the air around them. "Do not vocalize their clicks. You do not know what you're saying back." The man turned to exit, then stopped at the threshold. Without turning around, he added a sentence that made Bobo's chest hollow. "They choose a person. They listen for years. They wait." After the door shut, Bobo felt the house shift, wood settling, or something pressing gently against the siding. For the first time in his life, the woods he loved felt predatory. He burned the SD card that night, but it didn't change anything, because the next morning he found fresh spirals in his driveway gravel. No wind could have arranged them, and embedded perfectly at the center of each spiral was something worse: his own boot print. Despite the warnings, despite the spirals, despite the stranger's voice lingering like static in his ears, Bobo went back. Not with a crew, not with cameras. Just one borrowed thermal scope, and the kind of dread that pushes a man forward instead of stopping him. Crescent Field had been sealed off on paper, but no fencing stopped determined hikers. Within minutes of stepping onto that soil, he realized something had changed. The forest was silent. No insects, no owls, not even wind brushing leaves. A dead stillness, thick enough to taste. The field where his footage was taken now bore markings, wide circular impressions in the dirt, interlocking like gears. It looked like something heavy had stood there, many of them. When he crouched to inspect a depression, his thermal scope glowed bright at the edges. Heat signatures, recent. That's when he saw it. At the far end of the field, a lone tent stood, brand new nylon, bright red, the kind backpackers use. But no campsite surrounded it. No footprints, no smoke, no gear. Just the tent. His pulse thudded. He called out, voice cracking, "You all right in there?" Nothing. Then the tent wall moved. Not from inside, like something brushed against the fabric from outside. Slowly, like a fingertip tracing along canvas. Then another line. Then a curve. And before Bobo could rationalize, the fabric stretched outward, imprinting a face from the outside pushing inward. Upside down, elongated, features pressed like clay, eyes too large, mouth too wide. No breathing, just a silent stare. Bobo staggered back, tripping over himself. The face slid across the tent wall without footsteps, without weight. Like gravity, meant nothing. A click sounded. First one, then a responding click from the tree line. The same communication pattern from the warehouse. The same rhythm that had followed him home. He fumbled with the thermal scope. The tent showed icy cold shapes clustering around it. Multiple figures. Thin, jointed, spindly. He watched as the face turned, tracking him, though no head should bend that way. The clicks intensified, overlapping, and suddenly the tent collapsed inward, like something had vacuumed the space out of existence. No tearing, no bursting seams, just gone. The clearing erupted with clicking responses. Bobo didn't run at first. He staggered, paralyzed, until a slow, heavy shift of branches overhead broke whatever spell held him. They were above him, watching. He finally bolted through brush, lungs burning, clicks following in perfect measured intervals, not chasing, tracking, recording. He didn't stop until headlights blasted through the trees. 2 black SUVs. Same man in the windbreaker. He stepped out, expression unchanged. "You shouldn't have come back," he said quietly. "When they see you twice, they don't forget." Behind him, agents moved without flashlights, like they already knew where every tree stood. As they passed him, one whispered a phrase Bobo wishes he never heard. "They're cataloging." Today, Bobo's voice quivers when he speaks. He avoids cameras. He sleeps with lights on. Because some nights, when the wind dies and the world goes still, he swears he hears clicking, answering itself from different parts of his property. And sometimes, in freshly fallen pine needles, he finds spirals, with his footprint centered perfectly inside. Bobo doesn't talk about Crescent Field publicly anymore, but privately, he's begun telling a few trusted investigators the same chilling thing. The creatures aren't hunting, they're counting, cataloging behavior, mapping who returns. He says those spirals are assigned marks, not threats, inventory tags. And recently, he woke up to something new outside his window. 2 spirals, side by side. The second was smaller. A friend had visited the night before. He's convinced the government isn't hiding these things because they can't stop them. They're hiding them because acknowledging them would expose a terrifying truth. Some wilderness doesn't belong to us, some trails aren't accidental, and sometimes, when you leave a forest, it doesn't mean the forest leaves you. For years, Matt Moneymaker was the loudest voice in the Bigfoot world, but recently, something changed. His posts stopped, his public appearances disappeared, and insiders whispered that he saw something he was never supposed to capture near a decommissioned military base. Tonight, Matt breaks his silence and reveals evidence so disturbing it sent government contractors to his doorstep. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe, because what he's about to expose has never been acknowledged publicly and may explain why people near that base keep vanishing. Before Matt Moneymaker ever went public, before the TV cameras and the memes, there was a file in the BFRO archive marked only with a red line and a date, 1997. It referenced a facility along the Pacific Northwest foothills called Fort Cinder Point. Official records say it was decommissioned after a fuel containment leak. Locals laugh at that explanation. According to them, the base never closed. It just went underground, literally. Rumors swirled among hikers and old loggers. Low-frequency sirens drifting through the trees, convoys of windowless trucks rolling through at night, and every couple of months, the forest going dead quiet. No insects, no birds, not even wind. To seasoned trackers, silence is more dangerous than noise. Those reports eventually landed on Matt's desk. At first, he dismissed them, until he noticed something unusual. Every witness described movement in the tree line, upright figures that dropped to all fours when light hit them. Not bear posture, not cougar behavior, something else. So Matt did what he'd always done. He followed the trail. Off-season, without his TV crew, without producers, just a thermal scope, audio gear, and his map marked with the locations of complaints. When he arrived near the base perimeter, he noticed something strange immediately. 2 fences, one rusty and neglected, one new. Razor wire gleamed under moonlight. The woods surrounding the base felt wrong. Trees leaned inward unnaturally, their trunks curved like they were bending toward something underground. Matt set his first recorder. 10 minutes later, he heard a faint metallic humming, steady, rhythmic, coming from below soil level. Ventilation, machinery, something operating where no facility should be. Then he found the tracks. 6 impressions in soft clay, each deeper than his boots, each spaced at distances only possible with powerful legs. The stride was too long for a human and too heavy for a bear. What chilled him most wasn't the depth, it was the subtle, inward turn of the toes, a primate trait not found in North American wildlife. life. Just as he knelt to document them, a distant double-tone siren pulsed through the woods. The trees trembled. For a full 5 seconds, everything obeyed a command he couldn't hear. Then the siren stopped, and from somewhere beyond the perimeter fence, something answered, not with a howl, but a low, layered vibration he felt in his ribs. Matt lifted his parabolic mic. Whatever was out there answered the siren in fluent rhythm, and it wasn't alone. Matt stayed crouched in the clay, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the dense tree line beyond the fence. The woods didn't move, not naturally. Instead, the shadows shifted in deliberate, measured intervals, like something was repositioning itself between trunk and darkness. Movement without sound. Predators don't announce their presence. They observe. He lifted his thermal viewer. At first, he saw nothing but heat ghosts, rabbit trails, residual warmth on rocks. Then, in the upper edge of the scope, a shape flickered, tall, upright, narrow head, shoulders hunched forward in a posture no human stands in. It swayed side to side, like testing light angles. When the figure realized it was being watched, it stopped swaying entirely. Total stillness. Matt steadied the scope. The creature's head tilted, slowly, intelligently, like a scientist examining a specimen. Then 2 more shapes bled into the thermal palette from behind it. Their heat signatures overlapped, almost synchronized, but their silhouettes were wrong. Limbs too long, knees bending subtly backwards. Every instinct in Matt's body screamed, leave. He didn't. Instead, he whispered a vocalization, one he'd recorded years earlier, a classic whoop, a harmless test. He wanted to gauge whether these were just large primates, but what answered wasn't a whoop. It was a triple click, followed by a resonant harmonic downshift that vibrated his tiny chest mic into distortion. Matt felt the sound more than he heard it. The trees rippled, leaves trembling even though the air stayed perfectly still. A second cluster of clicks echoed back from the opposite direction, something answering, communicating, coordinated. Then came the first visual horror. All 3 upright shapes dropped to all fours, without bending their torsos. Their spines didn't round or flex. They simply hinged downward, joints rotating sideways like the mechanics of a folding machine. Every hair on Matt's arms stood up. Predators don't drop like that unless they're preparing to advance. The double siren pulsed again, shorter this time, and the creatures froze mid-crawl. Heads snapped toward the base. They waited, obedient, like soldiers responding to command. Then, without warning, they retreated into darkness, vanishing in complete silence. Matt exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. He lowered his scope. That's when he saw something new. Boot prints, fresh, not his, leading deeper into the restricted woods. He followed them with his eyes until they faded into brush. He wasn't the only human out here tonight. Something, or someone, was tracking them, and he didn't realize the boot prints followed a perfect spiral path. Predators mark straight lines. Researchers mark spiral. Something intelligent was cataloging, not hunting. Matt snapped a photo of the spiral boot pattern, heart hammering. Thick pine canopies swallowed the sky, letting only thin ribbons of moonlight touch the dirt. Something about the silence felt unnatural. Silence had intent. His instincts, not his curiosity, pulled him deeper. 20 minutes later, the boot trail led him to a low ridge overlooking a ravine. Matt expected more trees, more tracks. Instead, there was infrastructure, a rectangular concrete trench lined with steel rails covered by slatted metal grates. Not military fencing, containment fencing. From below, cool air seeped upward like breath. He crouched. The grate hummed, pulsing faintly, as if something alive was exhaling heat from the earth. That's when he smelled it. Metal, rot, wet fur. He shifted the grate just enough to peek down. The ditch held several long, black sealed bags, body-sized. The plastic bulged around angular shapes, not smooth enough for human limbs. Some bags had scratch impressions pressed outward, enormous claws having buckled plastic. From the inside, a light flickered on behind him. "Don't move." The flashlight beam stabbed across his shoulders. Matt froze, palms open. A man in brown contractor fatigues approached. Not military, but military adjacent. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't angry. He was scared. "You shouldn't be here," the man whispered. His eyes darted toward the fence line, scanning the tree line. not for backup, but for watchers. Matt asked what was in the bags. The contractor didn't answer right away. He swallowed hard. When the power cycles drop, they try to climb out. Your timing is incredibly unlucky. Matt pressed, "What are they?" The man sighed, slumping against the concrete edge. "They're not Bigfoot. They're not animals. They're subjects." He hesitated. "They aren't breeding. They're adapting." Before Matt could respond, a distant double-tone siren pulsed again. This time, the contractor flinched violently. "We triggered a sweep. If they see 2 heat signatures instead of 1, they coordinate differently." He shoved a folded map into Matt's vest. "There are tunnels. Don't stand near ventilation. Don't mimic their vocalizations. Don't talk if you hear clicking behind you. They listen first." Matt demanded more answers, but the man was already backing away. "Leave now," he said. "And if you wake up and find spirals around your house, don't run. Running means you're ready." The forest behind them rustled. Not branches, not wind. Something shifting downward, heavy, curious. Matt didn't wait. He ran. And as he fled across the ridge, the siren's echo followed him like a warning heartbeat, and something answered it from beneath the earth, tapping the grate softly in return. Tap. Tap, tap, 3 clicks. Intelligent. Matt didn't stop running until the forest thinned and moonlight cut through in silver beams. His lungs burned, breath scraping like sand across his throat, but the woods behind him stayed quiet, too quiet. Not silence of absence, silence of observation. He killed his flashlight and let his eyes adjust. Darkness swallowed everything at first. Then shapes began to emerge. Halfway up a slope, between 2 leaning pines, a figure stood. Matt froze. The silhouette was tall, shoulders hunched forward like an ape trying to appear smaller. But it wasn't hair that caught moonlight. It was skin, pale, smooth, almost translucent. The creature leaned sideways, not turning its head, but rotating its entire upper torso like a hinge. Matt lifted his parabolic mic, hands trembling. What he heard wasn't breathing. It was a low mechanical whirring, like gears shifting inside a chest cavity. He whispered a basic whoop again. Testing. The thing responded instantly, not with a vocalization, but a perfect mimic of the pitch. But the tone was layered, like 3 voices stacked slightly out of sync. Matt's spine prickled. This wasn't copying. It was sampling, like it was analyzing resonance. Then, another sound. From deeper in the trees came a rolling chuff, followed by the distinct crack of branches bending downward with enormous weight. Something massive was moving toward the watcher. The pale figure shifted posture, dropping to all 4s without a hint of joint strain. It turned its head last, a delayed rotation, as if its spine obeyed a different blueprint. Matt slowly backed away. Leaves barely rustled beneath his boots, but they responded. The watcher's head snapped toward the sound. No eyeshine, no blink, just shadowed sockets like recessed cavities. It stepped forward, once, twice, deliberate. Matt lifted his thermal scope, praying the lens wouldn't glint. Through the display, he found something worse than a body. Cold spots on its skin. Not hot like mammals, not uniform like fur. Segments of chilled tissue, arranged in repeating patterns like external armor had fused with biology. And then it blinked. Not vertical, not horizontal. Inward, like fleshy shutters closing from both sides. The branches behind it imploded inward with a crash. Matt swung the scope just in time to catch a second figure climbing down a tree. Backwards, limbs rotating beyond natural range. Its face never left his direction. Both creatures froze. Then, a third tone siren pulsed from the base. The watchers stopped advancing, heads twitching toward the sound in synchrony, responding, obeying. And every creature Matt had seen retreated toward the siren, like iron filings to a magnet. Through the quiet, Matt's recorder picked up a final whisper of layered breath. "You shouldn't speak." Except Matt hadn't spoken. Something in the dark was speaking through his microphone. Matt didn't sleep when he got home. He dumped the audio file into his editing software and stared at the waveform. The siren pulse appeared clean, 2 perfect peaks. But the response from the creatures was a stacked series of frequencies, almost like layered piano keys struck in microscopic delays. That's impossible for biological vocal cords. He isolated the sound. It got worse. Hidden between the clicks were subharmonics, tones so low they shouldn't exist without machinery. Below them were overtones only primates produce. and beneath those was something else entirely. A faint metallic breathing, like vibrating metal plates expanding and contracting. It wasn't natural. It wasn't synthetic. It was both. He sent the file to his friend, an acoustic analyst who owed him favors. The reply arrived at 3:14 a.m. "Delete this! Now!" Matt called him. The analyst answered on the first ring, whispering like someone was in the room. "These aren't vocals," he said. "They're commands. The siren signals ground activity. The creatures respond with status codes." Matt's stomach hollowed. He asked what status codes meant. "They're reporting. Roll call. Something is checking where every unit is located during power cycle." Before Matt could speak, his friend cut him off. "Your microphone picked up something else. Not voice, pressure, like a throat that opens in 3 sections. And then the bombshell, I ran the spectrogram through pattern recognition. Someone else has been recording these since 1998. Every time there's a power outage near Fort Cinder Point, sightings spike, and those responses, they get faster, more coordinated." Matt asked if the analyst could send proof. "No," the man whispered. "My system crashed when I exported the files. Blue screens, then my webcam turned on by itself. Seconds later, the call dropped." Matt replayed his audio again. At the very end, so faint most human ears would miss it, was a new sound. A hollow tap, repeated slowly, 3 times, like knuckles against glass. He muted the speakers. The tapping kept going. It wasn't on the file anymore. It was coming from his window. Matt approached slowly, heart in his throat. Outside, just beyond the curtains, 3 long dents pressed into the condensation. Not fingerprints, not claws, more like indentation from teeth, and underneath them, drawn perfectly in fog, 3 vertical marks. The same cadence from the forest. Someone, or something, now knew where he lived. The morning after the tapping, Matt tried to ground himself in routine. Coffee, notes, emails, distraction. But when he opened his laptop, something was wrong. Every BFRO report within a 12-mile radius of Fort Cinder Point, dozens of sightings going back 20 years, had vanished from the database. Not deleted, removed from the index. He typed direct URLs from memory. 404, page not found. Then another glitch. When he searched Cinder Point, the autofill suggestion read, restricted in red text. No one at BFRO had access to restricted tags. That was server level. His phone buzzed. It was one of his veteran field investigators, voice shaking. "All my reports from that region, gone. Even the witness names. And Matt, 2 of the witnesses don't answer calls anymore." Matt froze. Witnesses don't just disappear. He checked social media for updates. Instead, he found something chilling. Every time he tried to tweet, the compose box flickered, then grayed out. His cursor froze mid-keystroke. After 3 attempts, his account forcibly logged out. A message appeared. "Your activity violates protective review." He wasn't banned. He wasn't warned. He was being silenced algorithmically. Then the calls started. Unknown number. No caller ID. Silence. When he answered, breathing, not human panting, mechanical, rhythmic, like something inhaling through 3 channels at once. Next, colleagues began backing away. One apologized, voice trembling. "Matt, please stop contacting witnesses. We signed NDAS. They're monitoring our devices now." Monitoring? Then he checked his front door. A package sat on the porch. No postage. Inside, a printed stack of his own emails, private drafts that never left his computer. Someone had accessed his writing while offline. At the bottom page was a handwritten note. "They adapt to behaviors. You are predictable." That night, something stood behind his property line. Tall, still. Its silhouette bent forward like it was sniffing the ground. Then it began clicking. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. The cadence from his recording. Matt flicked his porch light on. The silhouette didn't run. It simply leaned away, disappearing backwards into darkness, without turning around. Joints folding like hinges. When Matt returned inside, he noticed the back window condensation again. 3 dents. Same position, same spacing. But this time, right below the marks, was something new. Dragged across the glass in a finger-like smear. Run equals permission. Matt barely slept after the message on his window. At sunrise, he drove 2 hours to meet the BFRO investigator who'd whispered warnings. When Matt arrived, the man was pacing outside his cabin. Eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. He pointed toward the tree line without speaking. Matt listened. Silence. That same predatory quiet. Inside, the investigator pulled out a hard drive wrapped in foil. "They can hear electronics," he whispered. "They mimic idle power signatures." He plugged it into a battery-powered laptop and showed Matt footage he'd captured near Cinder Point the night before. In frame, a ventilation grate at the base's perimeter. Steam poured upward, then stopped abruptly, like someone turned off the breath of a furnace. Something rose into view, not climbing, unfolding, vertebrae clicking into place with mechanical precision. Its skin was smooth, but webbed with darker grooves, heat diffusion channels. Then the video glitched. 3 black frames in a row, each frame showing the creature closer. Not walking, jumping frames in perfect still poses, like someone dragging it forward in time. The investigator slammed the laptop shut, sweating. "It doesn't move when watched. It moves when observed." Matt didn't understand. The man clarified, "They're quantum predators. Awareness restricts them. But the moment consciousness flickers, fear, distraction, they advance." Suddenly, the cabin lights flickered. Once, twice. That double-tone siren pulsed from miles away, faint but unmistakable. The investigator's face went white. "The power cycle," he breathed. "When the grid resets, they migrate." Outside, brush shifted, not like footsteps, like something passing through leaves without disturbing weight. Splits? Phase displacement? Matt didn't know. Then the investigator whispered, "They're not breaking out, they're let out." Matt grabbed his gear, rushing for the truck. The siren pulsed again. Shadows stretched unnaturally long along the driveway. A silhouette leaned from behind a pine, torso bending further than bone should allow. It tracked them, not with eyes, but with sonar clicks bouncing off the truck's frame. They drove hard. 15 miles later, multiple black SUVs blocked the road. Men in plain clothes stepped out, palms up, not hostile, just tired. One approached Matt's window. "We're not your enemy," he sighed. "We're containment logistics." Matt demanded answers. The agent shook his head. "They aren't aliens. They aren't animals. They're a rejected evolution branch. We kept them underground because surface radiation changes them." Matt's stomach turned. "Changes how?" The man's eyes dropped. "They learn faster." He slid Matt a sealed envelope. "Do not open this until the siren stops, and don't go home tonight." Then the agent leaned close, voice barely audible. "You weren't supposed to record the return sequence." Matt froze. "Return? Surface harvest," the man corrected. "They don't hunt individuals. They collect patterns." As Matt pulled away, he noticed marks on the SUV's windows. 3 vertical streaks. Condensation dents matching his own, not teeth. Mapping points. When the siren finally faded, Matt opened the envelope. Inside was a single sentence. "They remember by sound. They choose by silence." Outside his windshield, pine needles fluttered in 3 spirals. Matt hasn't returned to Fort Cinder Point since that night. He moved to a new address, switched phones, closed every social platform. But silence didn't save him. Because sometimes, after the power dips in his neighborhood, he hears clicking through the vents. 3 taps, answered by 3 more somewhere across the house. Witnesses nearby are vanishing again. Spiral patterns show up on porches. Pets refuse to go outside. Matt's warning is simple. If you hear the double-tone siren, don't speak, don't breathe loudly, don't run. Because when the surface cycles begin, the watchers aren't hunting flesh. They're hunting recognition. And once they remember your sound, they don't forget. Something unprecedented just happened. Cliff Barackman, one of the most respected, level-headed researchers from Finding Bigfoot, has finally broken his silence. In a sudden live stream, Cliff confirmed that a secret episode from Season 5 was pulled, wiped, and buried by an unknown organization only minutes after filming wrapped. According to him, it contained the most disturbing physical evidence of a hominid species ever captured. But cameras weren't the only things erased. Field notes, thermal files, and even crew memories were targeted. Before we begin, subscribe, because what Cliff reveals could unravel everything we thought we knew about the woods. When Finding Bigfoot entered its 5th production cycle, nothing seemed unusual. In fact, fans were excited. The show teased a high-risk lockdown at a watershed watershed in Washington state, deep inside forest acreage so remote that even Google Earth blurred sections of terrain. Internally, the crew referred to it as Cascade Creek, and according to Cliff Barackman, this was supposed to be their most important investigation yet. Early scouting revealed strange tree breaks, unnatural humidity pockets, and claw marks with opposing curvature, like something grabbed the bark with two thumbs. Production scheduled 3 nights of filming, but after day 1, the tone on set shifted. Crew reported tension in the air, like static pressure before lightning. The forest canopy muffled sound, swallowing voices a few feet away. Cliff commented on camera that the woods felt spatially wrong, distances stretching and compressing between shots. Joking, he chalked it up to lack of sleep, but his body language told a different story. Even skeptics on the team noticed the silence. No insects, no birds, no coyote calls. A forest that quiet isn't sleeping, it's listening. When night fell, thermal cameras detected 3 heat signatures moving along ridgelines. Not animal heat profiles, but hominid-shaped silhouettes with elongated calves. As the crew debated, something vocalized from the riverbed. It wasn't a whoop, it wasn't a howl. It was 2 voices layered over each other, one low, one falsetto, harmonizing on accident. Bobo froze mid-sentence and whispered, "That's not biomechanically normal." Moments later, a tree shook violently 30 yards away, but seismic readings showed no ground tremor. Cliff tagged the bark with a sampling kit and found bioluminescent residue glowing faintly green, like algae, except dry and warm to the touch. Producers high-fived. They knew they had something real. Then production flagged the episode as sensitive. This isn't unusual. Sometimes government land is involved. But on the drive back to town, 2 black SUVs followed at a legal distance. No plates, tinted window. At the hotel, the props manager noticed their equipment had been rearranged. Cases opened, zippers half closed. Memory card organizers shifted. Cliff joked on camera, "Either the cleaning staff is curious, or we're not alone anymore." That line was cut from every promo. And the next morning, the network's internal schedule listing the episode simply disappeared. Not delayed, deleted. The second night began like any other investigation. Camera calibration, mic levels, perimeter sweeps. But the forest still hadn't woken up. No wind pushed the canopy. No insect song threaded the branches. It was as if sound itself refused to cross that tree line. Cliff noted in his log, almost whispering, "Silence this thick usually means apex predation." But of what? Around 12:41 a.m., the crew captured their first full-bodied vocalization. At first, it resembled a territorial primate call, low, chesty, resonant. But halfway through the howl, a second voice layered beneath it, vibrating at a slightly different pitch. It wasn't echo, it wasn't harmonics. Audio analysis later showed 2 independent vocal folds. No known North American animal can do that. As the noise rippled across the valley, Bobo stiffened. He'd spent decades hearing Bigfoot whoops, distant knocks, deep bellows. But this sound carried something he said he'd never heard before. Volition, purpose. "That thing knew where we were," he muttered, voice tight. Minutes later, something slammed into a spruce tree 40 yards away. Not from the trunk, but from the midpoint, 15 feet up. The impact was so violent that bark exploded outward. Cliff swung his flashlight toward the branches, capturing a glimpse of something climbing sideways along the interior limbs. Not hand over hand like a monkey, more like a centipede, but human-sized, moving in sudden, silent bursts. Thermal cams flickered. The silhouette vanished, but the heat trace remained suspended in the air for 3 seconds, like a body that had been there longer than physics allowed. Then the mimicry began. From deeper within the watershed came laughter. Cliff's laughter. The exact laugh he'd given earlier that day while joking about misidentifying scat. Same rhythm, same pitch, same hesitating stutter, but the second repetition dragged oddly long. Vowels stretched like elastic. Someone learning to imitate human joy. The crew froze. Seconds later, Cliff's voice echoed from 2 different directions at once. "Hey guys, over here." But Cliff hadn't spoken. Jay raised his parabolic mic and caught whispers traveling between treetops, not at ground level. They rode the canopy like radio transmission. When slowed down in post, the whispers formed broken sentences. Observe, harvest, adapt. Before the team could retreat, a boulder, easily 200 pounds, crashed into the riverbed beside them without any rolling sound preceding it. It had not tumbled, it had been placed. Bobo shook his head, whispering, "Something's escorting us." And up on the ridge, 2 amber eyes blinked. Then another pair, offset by 12 feet, blinked out of sync. Whatever was hunting wasn't alone. By the third night, Cliff pushed for physical samples. Stories are one thing, but biological residue changes everything. They returned to the riverbed where the 200-pound boulder had landed. Beneath it, pressed into the silt, they found a smear of gelatinous tissue, transparent like cartilage, stretching into thin strands that shimmered under infrared. Cliff scraped a piece into a vial, noting the faint scent, ozone and rotting cedar. Next, they discovered something that froze every crew member in place. Fiber hair bundles embedded 6 feet up the trunk of a Douglas fir. Under magnification, each strand showed hollow, segmented cores that flexed when pressed. Cliff described it as part feather, part fiber optic. Even stranger, when exposed to UV light, the strands glowed faintly blue, tracing branching fractal patterns. Bobo suggested it might be structural reinforcement for climbing. Cliff disagreed. "This looks engineered." As cameras rolled, Cliff noticed tree bark where something, not claws, but 2 opposable digits, had pulled downward, leaving a mirrored impression. Humans have 1 opposable thumb. Primates only partially. These impressions showed 2, positioned like a clamp. Cliff's voice cracked. "This thing manipulates tools." Then they found the bone fragment. Wedged between cedar roots, it was smooth, pale, and perfectly polished. The outer surface bore faint etching, like microscopic grooves manufactured for mechanical stress relief. When Cliff tapped it lightly, it resonated at a specific frequency, like a tuning fork. Jay's thermal camera showed the fragment was warmer than the soil around it, despite lying buried. Things escalated further when the parabolic mic detected movement signatures circling them. Triangulated footsteps synchronized around their perimeter. Something moved in formation. Predator wolves don't do that. Primates don't either. Suddenly, the audio spiked. A shrill, metallic shriek vibrated the earbuds and knocked Bobo to his knees. The waveform wasn't organic. It bore the digital compression pattern of something recording and replaying itself back. Cliff's screen displayed packet loss artifacts, as if someone's phone was being intercepted. That's when Billy shouted. 20 yards ahead, half buried in the moss, he found knuckle padding. Thick, rubber-like cartilage discs fused to bone, worn smooth, as though something walked on its fists. The size indicated a weight between 400 to 500 pounds, but with 0 heel pressure, suggesting it distributed its mass unnaturally, almost like someone trying to imitate quadrupedalism. Cliff bagged every sample, adrenaline buzzing. He whispered, "This isn't folklore. This species is mid-transition." The forest answered by knocking 3 times, then a 4th, shifted slightly off rhythm, like an echo trying to become original. Moments later, the trees went silent. The investigation was no longer about Bigfoot. It had become evidence collection, and something in the woods realized it had been caught. The air changed first. Cliff would later describe it as barometric compression, like a storm collapsing inward instead of rolling in from a distance. Jay's boom mic crackled with static, then went dead. That shouldn't happen in open woodland. Radio equipment started cross-talking without input, fragments of their own earlier sentences whispering back through the earpieces out of order. The forest was playing conversation like shuffled audio cards. At 1:13 a.m., the first resonance event hit. It began as a low vibration in the soil, barely felt, just enough to rattle the vents on the camera housing. But then, the resonance traveled up the tree trunks, hundreds of them, causing needles to tremble in unison, not rustling in wind, vibrating, harmonic. Every trunk oscillated at the same frequency, as if responding to a tuning fork. The sound triggered nausea. Jay vomited behind a stump. Bobo shouted for distance. Cliff checked his GPS. The screen pulsed, coordinates dissolving into repeating digits. 33.33 divided by 33.33. That's not a location. That's a loop. When the resonance stopped, the silence felt worse, like the woods were holding breath. Then came the knock sequence. 3 knocks to their left. A pause. 2 knocks behind them. A pause. one knock above from the canopy. It wasn't random. It was positional mapping, triangulation. Something was tracking them using sound. Thermal picked up a heat signature crouched on the underside of a branch. Spider-like, arms pointed downward, legs bowed unnaturally. But when Cliff blinked, the signature split into 2, then 3, as if the image were being mirrored imperfectly. The copies wavered like smoke. The parabolic mic finally stabilized long enough to catch breath patterns, rhythmic but mismatched. One exhalation late, like something learning how lungs work. Bobo, voice cracking. "It's practicing!" Something heavy crashed 10 yards away. The crew moved to flank, but the crash repeated from the opposite direction. Identical amplitude, identical waveform. Jay realized both sounds were recordings. Something was copying environmental events and replaying them like bait. The real crash came a moment later, right behind the cameraman. It snapped a sapling clean in half. The camera tumbled, landing lens up. For 3 seconds, it caught the silhouette of a figure hovering just beneath a branch, knees clenched to its chest, balancing without effort. Then its head turned, too slowly, too deliberately, to look directly into the lens. The eyes didn't glow. They reflected, not light. Cliff's own face, mirrored faintly across the cornea. The team bolted. Cameras swung wildly. Branches didn't crack under their pursuer's weight. It followed like gravity had less claim on it. Halfway to the vehicles, they heard a voice ahead. "Guys, wait up!" Cliff stopped. It was Bobo's voice, but Bobo was right beside him. The woods erupted with overlapping versions of that sentence. 6, then 8, then dozens, pitched differently, pacing differently, learning tonal inflection. It wasn't chasing them, it was sizing them. When they finally broke into the clearing, all the trees behind them stopped vibrating at once, as if the forest had just closed its eyes. By the time the crew reached the motel, everyone was silent in that shaken, wide-eyed way survivors get. But Cliff couldn't shake the feeling that something from the woods had followed. Around 2:18 a.m., heavy palmed footsteps dragged across the hallway carpet. Slow, 2-beat rhythm, weight distributed on knuckles like a quadruped, forcing itself upright. When Cliff checked the peephole, the hall was empty, yet the parabolic mic recorded breath patterns behind the door. Seconds later, whisper playbacks began, partial lines they had spoken hours earlier, rearranged out of order like something assembling meaning. Cliff whispered back, "You're not supposed to know language." Then came the delivery. At sunrise, Cliff opened his door and froze. Resting gently on the doormat was the vibrating bone fragment they'd collected, warm to the touch, humming faintly. Attached was a note written in stiff, uneven lettering, "Keep quiet." But the fiber texture on the ink suggested it wasn't written by a pen. It was pressed, like cartilage, dragged across paper. When they returned to the production van, every biological sample was missing. Cameras, drives, and gear remained untouched. Police shrugged. The network told them to drop it. Overnight, the episode's listing vanished from the internal schedule. Metadata was scrubbed. 3 days later, Cliff spotted a plain white van outside his house. 2 men stepped out, wearing identical boots. One held a handheld scanner, lights pulsing softly. Cliff filmed from upstairs, but the footage saved as perfect static. File size unchanged. That's not deletion, that's replacement. The next morning, Cliff found a printed transcript taped to his window. Complete sentences he spoke in the motel room, down to every pause. At the bottom, typed cleanly, "You are not studying them. They are studying us." Crew contracts were altered retroactively. Pay stubs removed travel dates. Producers claimed they'd never filmed in those woods. Worse, the people involved began forgetting. One editor swore she never worked the footage at all. A sound tech had no memory of capturing the layered vocalization. When pressed, he blinked, confused, and asked, "Cascade what?" That night, another note appeared, this one on the inside of Cliff's kitchen window, taped from within. "Let us erase it, or we erase you." The bone fragment disappeared from his attic. No break-in, no missing dust, gone from reality like the episode. Cliff realized the truth. This wasn't a cover-up, it was containment. And containment only matters when something is still out there. Cliff tried to bury himself in normal life, lectures, emails, museum duties, but silence doesn't equal peace. Every night brought mirrors that seemed to lag reflections, faint knocks behind drywall, and the uneasy sense that the house's footprint wasn't static. Still, he stayed quiet until the footage surfaced. No message, no sender, just a flash drive in his mailbox. When Cliff opened the files, his stomach hollowed. The thermal footage from Cascade Creek had been stabilized and scrubbed of static. The hovering figure, blazing white against black forest heat, told a different story. Its limbs weren't just long. They elongated mid-movement, bones telescoping under skin, joints shifting like wet hinges adapting to terrain. The knuckle pads they found? Visible now as heat sinks, dispersing energy into soil without leaving prints, an evolutionary trick to stay invisible. The face burned worst. It wasn't blank, it changed. Expression sliding through Bobo's grin, Cliff's scowl, Jay's confused eyes. Not mimicry, rehearsal, something perfecting human emotion like phonetics. Another angle showed their campsite, night vision green, calm, until the background rearranged. Trees bending inward, trunks quivering, branches folding into shapes like rib cages. It wasn't moving through the forest was helping it. A third clip, audio waveforms peaking at identical intervals across multiple microphones. Not one creature vocalizing. 6. Harmonizing across ridgelines, triangulating echolocations like a sonar grid. Territorial, coordinated, military. Last, a thermal drone shot. 6 signatures arranged surgically around the watershed, evenly spaced, a containment ring. Not predators, sentinels, protecting something deeper. Cliff's house lights flickered, then headlights washed across his front lawn. A black SUV, doors opened quietly. 3 individuals, no insignia, walked to his porch. No masks, no urgency. The oldest spoke calmly through the door. "You've seen enough to understand why the episode cannot exist." Cliff asked who they were. Silence. A second voice. "You weren't meant to collect samples. You weren't meant to record patterns. These organisms fall under a federal classification older than your show. Organisms, not cryptids." Humanoid silence stretched thick. Then, the threat. "If this goes public, Cascade Creek won't be the only perimeter we expand." Moments before the SUV left, one man turned back, voice quiet but cold. "There's a reason national forests are mapped with missing squares." As taillights vanished, Cliff looked at his phone. New voicemail. No words, just the knocking pattern, but slowed, like something learning rhythm. And behind it, faint breathing. Inside the house, Cliff didn't sleep after the SUV left. Instead, he sat in his living room, every light on, bone-deep exhaustion wrapped around fear. Around 3:12 a.m., the house creaked, old wood settling, he told himself. But settlement doesn't pace. There it was again, 4 steps above him, slow, deliberate. Something was moving where no footsteps should exist. He grabbed the parabolic mic, pointed upward. Through the static came a breath, not animal, not human. A slow inhale, then a forced exhale, like lungs imitating what they'd only observed. Cliff whispered, "What do you want?" The attic replied with his exact voice. "What do you want?" Not playback. It answered, 2 seconds late, emotional tone wrong, syllables too heavy, something practicing. Cliff bolted outside. Cold air hit him like a wall. That's when he saw them, 3 silhouettes at the forest's edge, not standing, perched, arms clamped to trunks, legs bowed beneath them like sprung metal. Eyes reflected not moonlight, but faces, human faces projected in the corneas, scanning, indexing. When Cliff blinked, the silhouettes shuddered and vanished upward into branches with no sound at all, not running away, repositioning. At dawn, Cliff went to authorities. He expected dismissal. Instead, the ranger behind the desk stiffened at the mention of the watershed. He glanced toward an office door and whispered, "Don't file a report. You'll open a case you can't close." Then he slid a brochure over the counter. National forest closures. Tiny squares blacked out with no explanation. Cascade Creek wasn't the only one. When Cliff returned home, fresh prints, knuckle pads tracked across the dew on his lawn, perfectly spaced, intentional, leading to his front door, not away from it. His laptop pinged. A new folder had been added. Forest.4. Inside it, images of houses, suburban backyards, shot from above, marked with circular patterns in surrounding tree growth, the same fractal geometry found in the glowing residue on the windshield. Those patterns weren't natural, they were territorial claims, and more appeared weekly. Trail cam footage across the Pacific Northwest began glitching in the same looped audio pattern the creatures used. Then reports from Montana, Idaho, Northern California, people hearing their own voices outside windows, knuckles tapping walls, trees vibrating just before dawn. Cascade Creek wasn't a secret episode, it was a starting line. Tonight, Cliff's porch camera triggered again. He checked the feed. Nothing but static, until a faint, distorted whisper cut through, "Let us grow." The final frame flickered and revealed something perched just outside the view, something that had learned how to avoid the lens. Cliff ended his statement with one sentence. If forests are expanding silently, ask yourself, who are they expanding for? He's breaking the news because silence doesn't stop growth. Containment only matters when what's contained is still evolving. And somewhere, right now, a tree trunk just vibrated once, then twice, then a third knock, slightly off rhythm, learning you. For years, viewers of Finding Bigfoot saw Ronai Holland as the skeptical voice of reason, the scientist who challenged eyewitness claims, demanded hard evidence, and refused to let emotion steer the investigation. But ever since the show disappeared without answers, she stayed quiet until now. After months of silence, Ronai finally steps forward with new information about events behind the camera, unexplained encounters that never made it to air, and a discovery that may force her to rethink her entire career. Subscribe for more cryptid investigations just like this, because once you hear what she's been holding back, you'll never look at Finding Bigfoot the same way again. Ronai Holland's childhood in the Pacific Northwest wasn't defined by Bigfoot obsession like many assume. If anything, it was defined by silence, the quiet, uneasy stillness of the deep Washington woods. Her father worked as a respected fishing guide, the type of man locals trusted more than any forest ranger. He knew every creek bend, every animal sign, every ridge where elk huddled in winter. On slow summer evenings, he would point out unusual things to a young Ronai. Gouges in cedar bark 8 feet high, or heavy tracks in deadfall that didn't match cougar or bear. "It's the woods talking," he would say, brushing the hair from her eyes. Back then, she believed him. She was just a kid. Everything changed at 16 when her father passed suddenly from an unexpected cardiac event. The loss fractured her family's relationship with the land. Hunting trips stopped. Silence returned. But it felt colder now, crueler. To cope, Ronai escaped into textbooks. She immersed herself in biology, ecology, and primate anatomy. She built her identity on measurable data, not folklore. By the time she entered graduate school, she carried a chip on her shoulder the size of an old-growth stump. Believing in anything without proof felt reckless, even childish. Classmates noticed she never joked about cryptids like others. Professors found her meticulous, almost aggressive in her insistence that science shouldn't bend to comfort. She published early research on primate stride mechanics and vocalization patterns, gaining praise for her skepticism. When whispers of her father's old journals resurfaced, notebooks filled with strange vocal recordings and footprint sketches, she refused to read them. She boxed them away, literally, in her mother's attic. Science was her armor now. Students who worked with her said she didn't hate Bigfoot believers. She hated the distraction the myth caused. She saw it as a parasite draining resources from real conservation efforts. Which is why, years later, when producers from Finding Bigfoot approached her, she only agreed to be the skeptic. She wasn't just counterbalance for TV. She was defending the version of herself she'd built to survive. Deep down, the woods still whispered. But Ronai wasn't going to listen. Not yet. After graduate school, Ranai's work shifted toward salmon ecology along the Oregon and Washington river systems, a position that required long stretches of time in the field. She studied predator-prey relationships, monitored spawning behavior, and logged changes in forest canopy density, standard assignments for a rising biologist. But almost immediately, she began noticing patterns that didn't fit the textbooks. Elk herds that historically migrated south in October suddenly reversed course mid-season. Black bear populations abandoned territories that offered abundant food, instead taking routes that forced them into human settlements. She logged these anomalies carefully, expecting confirmation from other researchers, but the responses came back quiet and uneasy. During a survey near the Clackamas River Basin, her field microphone recorded a low, resonant call at 2:14 a.m. The sound wasn't canine, too deep. It wasn't cougar, too slow in cadence. Its pitch modulation suggested a large chest cavity, but the waveform was oddly flat, lacking the harmonic signature of known mammals. When she brought the recording into the lab, the spectrogram software produced a tag she'd never seen before: unknown mammalia. No match. Her supervisor told her to archive it and focus on verifiable data. The instruction wasn't dismissive, it was nervous. Over the next 9 months, more oddities appeared. River otters abandoned dens with fresh fish caches untouched. Ravens circled vacant forest clearings without visible carrion. A cluster of Douglas firs were stripped of bark nearly 12 feet up, far above deer scrape height. Local hunters she interviewed described hearing something that talked back and forth across valleys, deep and rhythmic, almost patterned. One man refused to let her quote him, whispering, "Some things don't want to be found." That's when she learned a quiet truth no academic dared voice publicly. Several field biologists across Washington had been meeting informally for years, comparing unclassified recordings. Most refused to publish. The consensus wasn't that the data was wrong, it was that acknowledging it would drag their careers into ridicule. At home, Ranai found herself dreaming of forests shifting like ocean tides. She'd wake to her phone buzzing, colleagues forwarding fresh anomalies, each prefaced with the same words, "Do not attach my name." Science had always been her shield against the unknown. Now it seemed like a wall that someone, or something, was gently tapping on from the other side. When producers from Finding Bigfoot first reached out in 2010, Ranai assumed it was a mistake. She'd spent her adult life distancing herself from her father's cryptid curiosities, and the idea of joining a television show about them felt like betrayal. But the producers weren't looking for a believer. They wanted contrast, a trained biologist who could scrutinize claims, analyze evidence, and ground the show in rational thought. They needed someone who, on camera, wouldn't hesitate to say, "No, this doesn't add up." And Ranai fit the mold perfectly. She negotiated only one condition. She would never be scripted to pretend belief. Authentic skepticism was non-negotiable. The network agreed publicly that honesty made the show credible. Privately, executives saw an even more valuable dynamic: tension. Skeptic versus believer drives viewership. But what viewers never saw was the briefing binder Ranai received before filming. Inside were dozens of witness statements never aired, most from individuals who refused to be filmed: wilderness firefighters, tribal wildlife technicians, and 2 retired forest law enforcement officers. They all described eerily consistent details: broad shoulders, forward-leaning posture, mid-foot flexibility uncommon in humans, and eye shine resembling deep amber. These weren't campfire storytellers, they were professionals, trained to observe. Production nights became controlled chaos. Ranai stood behind camera crews listening to vocalizations echoing through the tree line. Whoops, knocks, and deep chest-shaking roars no animal textbook could account for. As the skeptic, she knew the audience expected her to provide rational explanations, and she tried. But privately, she began cataloging similarities, frequency ranges, call intervals, suspected territorial spacing. Off-camera, she reviewed evidence with her co-hosts. She'd point out stride patterns or hair samples under ultraviolet examination. Sometimes she found an explanation: bear drag marks, elk alarm calls. But other times, her scientific toolbox came up empty. By the end of the first season, producers noticed something subtle in her field notes. She'd stopped writing unknown, likely misidentified animal. Instead, the notes read, unknown, consistent with prior reports. Her skepticism wasn't weakening, it was evolving, and when she realized how much the network chose not to air, she began to wonder whether she was being included to debunk the unknown or to make not acknowledging it more palatable to the public. Halfway through filming the Montana episode, the crew set up on the edge of dense timber, where local hunters reported something pacing tree lines at night. It was routine. Thermal cameras scanning, parabolic mics recording ambient sound, cast members whispering into radios. Then, just after 1 a.m., the temperature dropped sharply. Renai noticed the breath from camera operators suddenly fogging. Before she could comment, the thermal operator stiffened. On his monitor, a figure appeared, upright, broad-shouldered, and moving with deliberate, measured steps. Bear's lumber, elk bolt. This paced. It kept exactly 50 yards away, matching the team's lateral movement as if testing boundaries. The thermal signature glowed bright white, but there was no visible light source. Ranai listened carefully. The cadence of the footfalls was heavy, but not clumsy. 4 steps. Pause. 4 steps. Something intelligent enough to conceal noise. Suddenly the radios crackled with static, the kind that swallows voices. Parabolic microphones fuzzed. Ranai raised a hand to signal movement toward the tree line, but a producer intercepted her, whispering sharply, "Back to vehicles." Now it wasn't fear in his voice, it was protocol. Back at the lodge, Rane reviewed the thermal footage frame by frame. The leg extension was beyond human stride. Muscle mass bulged visibly through the heat signature. She noted mid-foot flexation, rare in hoax suits. The next morning, she was told legal needed to verify chain of custody on the clip. 2 weeks later, she learned the footage was pulled entirely for insufficient clarity. When the episode aired, viewers saw none of it. The pacing figure never existed, at least not on television. That night was the first time Ranai wondered if the network's silence wasn't about credibility, but containment. As Ranai's exposure on Finding Bigfoot grew, so did the number of scientists quietly contacting her. Field ecologists, forestry analysts, acoustic specialists, people trained to document anomalies without sensationalism. They shared private folders containing spectrograms, hair fibers with undocumented medulla patterns, and audio files exhibiting harmonic structures too complex for known North American mammals. These researchers didn't want credit. They wanted someone with a public platform to confirm they weren't imagining things. At first, Ranai assumed the silence from academia was just professional caution. But then, something stranger happened. People stopped responding. An ecologist from British Columbia, who had spent 5 years mapping vocalization clusters, suddenly canceled their correspondence. His university page disappeared, and his public email bounced back as undeliverable. Months later, Ranai heard through a colleague that he'd signed a non-disclosure agreement related to undocumented fauna. Another contact, a wildlife technician from Idaho, had been tracking large bipedal prints across riverbeds, prints with dermal ridges too crisp to be fabricated. She'd planned to publish a paper comparing them to primate foot structure. Before submission, her grant was revoked. She left her position entirely. When Ranai attempted to reach her, a family member answered and simply said, "She can't talk about that anymore." One of the most concerning cases involved a federal forestry analyst who had documented activity in the Cascades. He had classified dozens of sound signatures as Category U, uncertain vocalization. After multiple unexplained reassignments, he stopped attending community forums. His remaining research was archived under restricted access. A mutual friend later confided that he'd been pressured into signing paperwork to protect ecosystem-level confidentiality. The phrasing was so vague it bordered on meaningless, yet it carried legal teeth. When Ranai compared these disappearances with corresponding silence in peer groups, she noticed a pattern. The people who got closest to acknowledging a species, not just prints or sounds, but population estimates, went quiet permanently. The strangest moment came when she re-examined examined her own archived emails. Threads she clearly remembered saving were missing entire attachments. In their place, blank file references labeled "removed at sender's request." Except she hadn't received a request. Someone had accessed the Threads server side. She confronted a colleague in private, asking how often data went missing. He sighed, glanced around the parking lot, and asked a single question. "Do you really think the government would rather tell the public something new is out here, or pretend nothing is?" It was then Ranai realized the Bigfoot community wasn't just fractured by ridicule. It was being quietly curated by forces that understood silence better than discovery. In 2017, Ranai attended the estate auction of a retired backcountry ranger she had once met during production. He was a quiet man, the sort who remained stationed in high-ridge fire towers during lightning seasons, the kind of ranger who saw more than he ever reported. Among the boxes of maps and faded topo prints, Ranai noticed a small metal tin labeled only with the year 1989. Inside were 4 microcassettes, old field recordings, the type used before digital audio became standard. Late that night, in her garage, she threaded the first tape. The hiss of analog static filled the speakers, followed by distant owls, wind, and then something else. A howl, but not canine. Its resonance sat lower, subharmonic tones only large air cavities can produce. Then came a second howl, overlapping just slightly, harmonizing. No North American mammal produces coordinated vocal layering like that. Ranai replayed the segment dozens of times, mapping its pitch bend. The pattern almost resembled syllables. Intrigued, she converted the recordings to digital and imported them into university spectrogram software. The color bands, visual fingerprints of sound, displayed a bifurcated structure, 2 distinct vocal folds acting in unison. Only a handful of primates can do that. Humans can't, wolves can't, bears can't. And at the very bottom of the graph, barely visible, was a third harmonic flicker, like a hidden signature. When she casually presented the file during an academic lunch, 2 graduate assistants visibly stiffened. They weren't skeptical, they were frightened. One quietly asked where she acquired it. After she answered, both declined to attach their names to any discussion. The conversation ended abruptly when one of them received a text and excused himself, leaving his meal untouched. 48 hours later, Ranai received an email from a department address she didn't recognize. It requested, in the interest of wildlife safety, that she surrender all digital copies of the 1989 recordings. Attached was a document citing a federal wildlife privacy statute she'd never encountered. She ignored it. A week later, the tin vanished from her garage. Nothing else was disturbed. She checked her home cameras. The feed froze between 2:03 a.m. and 2:11 a.m. No glitch, no error code, just silence. The missing tin wasn't the disturbing part. It was the replacement, a single sticky note resting exactly where it had been. It read only, "You have your answer." Ranai still has encrypted duplicates of the audio, but she no longer plays them casually. She plays them the way you might listen to a storm, aware that something outside is awake and listening back. By 2018, Ranai had gathered enough compelling anomalies, audio signatures, stride metrics, territorial patterns, that any curious scientist would have attempted publication. But publishing was exactly what she couldn't do. In academia, Bigfoot wasn't a fringe subject, it was professional suicide. Tenure committees didn't entertain biological ghosts. Grants weren't awarded to researchers who questioned mammalian catalogs. Conservation boards avoided the word cryptid like an invasive fungus. The silence wasn't accidental, it was systemic. She'd watched what happened to those who tried. A respected wildlife biologist from Utah submitted a paper comparing mid-foot strike casts to primate locomotion. Within months, his funding dried up. A promising ecologist from Oregon hinted at an unidentified omnivore affecting elk distribution. Suddenly, her university merged her department and eliminated her research focus. These weren't coincidences, they were administrative scalpel cuts. Precise, clean, undisclosed. Sponsors pressured the Finding Bigfoot production team too. Advertisers wanted curiosity, not confirmation. A mystery that never resolves is cheaper to broadcast than a truth that demands action. The show thrived on ambiguity. Ranae's skepticism wasn't just welcomed, it was useful. It kept the narrative safe, playful, profitable. Anytime an episode leaned too close to legitimacy, executives would step in. Thermal figures disappeared, hair sample discussions were trimmed, spectrogram analysis segments were shortened to seconds, then cut entirely. Behind closed doors, even her castmates felt the weight. They joked off camera about being allowed only one step closer to truth at a time, never two. Ranae noticed each time someone spoke too confidently about physical evidence, producers would later take them aside for a tone conversation, not censorship steering. Her fear wasn't ridicule, it was isolation. If she spoke publicly, she risked becoming a mascot for conspiracy circles, used, quoted, distorted, and if she were wrong, she'd permanently stain the careers of anyone who trusted her. So she buried herself deeper into scientific rigor, building walls of data no one would ever see. But something outside academia shifted. After a particularly violent wildfire season, sightings surged, not north, where habitat recovered, but south, collapsing toward human encroachment. Ranchers found livestock kills with pressure fractures, inconsistent with mountain lions. Trail cameras captured blurred, upright silhouettes crossing logging roads in desperate, injured gaits. The population wasn't expanding. It was fleeing. That realization haunted Ranae more than any roar in the dark. Silence was no longer caution. It was negligence. Something was forcing a reclusive species out of its centuries-old territory. A predator? Resource collapse? She didn't know. But she knew this. When a top-tier omnivore begins migrating off-pattern, ecological equilibrium is breaking, and silence, hers included, was becoming part of the problem. For the first time, skepticism felt like cowardice. Everything changed in the spring of 2024. Forestry drones in southern Washington, originally deployed to monitor fire risk, captured something crossing a burn-scarred hillside at 3:14 a.m. The figure was upright, barrel-chested, and covering ground with unnatural efficiency. It moved through deadfall and jagged logs, as if stepping over shoeboxes. The operator, a former student of Ranae's, clipped a 5-second segment and sent it through an encrypted link. When Ranae analyzed the footage, frame by frame, micropixel compression revealed muscle contraction at the shoulders and thighs, details impossible for costumes or prosthetics. Its stride revealed mid-tarsal flexibility, a trait seen only in great apes. Even more concerning, its left arm hung lower, slightly swollen. The creature was injured. 2 days later, another drone documented a similar figure sprinting across a drainage cut, leaping a fallen cedar in a clean upward arc. No human could accelerate like that with an injured limb. Ranae compared both clips with her archived vocal recording from 1989, noticing patterns aligning with distress calls in chimp communication. Something was chasing this species, not predation, but displacement. Habitat pressure had reached a threshold. Ranae compiled the evidence into a private report and attempted quiet contact with regional wildlife offices. Every agency replied with the same scripted line: no classified fauna consistent with description. When she forwarded the spectrogram overlays, she received no response at all. That was the moment she understood. The silence wasn't confusion, it was policy. Last month, Ranae broke her silence in a controlled interview. Calmly, she stated the species exists and is retreating south. She emphasized no threat to humans. These animals avoid us. The real danger, she claims, is whatever occupies the territory now vacated. Rangers have begun reporting resonant, ultra-low roars, too deep for primates. Livestock carcasses show crushing force without tearing, suggesting something large hunts by impact, not teeth. Her closing line was chilling. If we only look at what's running, we'll never prepare for what's pursuing it. Her message wasn't hype, it was ecological mathematics. Something big just moved onto the board, and this time, silence won't protect anyone. From outside, Finding Bigfoot looked like an adventure about chasing myths in the woods. The cast were explorers, chasing what they believed in. But off-camera, their story turned darker. The show's cancellation, health rumors, tragic deaths of friends, and bitter feuds tore apart their dream. What began as a quest for mystery became a series of heartbreaking losses. Colleagues who died, fans who risked everything, a community torn apart. Some struggled with ordinary jobs to get by, while others fought to stay hopeful despite ridicule. Before dismissing another Sasquatch story, keep watching. The truth behind Finding Bigfoot is more human and heartbreaking than you could imagine right now. And subscribe right now so you don't miss out on more. When Finding Bigfoot first hit television in 2011, it promised viewers what had always seemed impossible: that 4 dedicated researchers would finally prove Bigfoot's existence. Each week, Matt Moneymaker, Bobo, Cliff, and Ranai trekked through remote forests, following witness reports and setting up camera traps. The show's formula, night vision hunts, wood knocks, and howls, was repetitive, yet audiences tuned in anyway. Over more than 100 episodes, the cast never captured conclusive evidence of a Sasquatch, yet their camaraderie and enthusiasm made the series a cult hit. Even critics called it addictive, acknowledging the odd appeal. Off-camera, however, the search always ran up against the same wall. There was no Bigfoot to be found. Ratings eventually slipped, and, after a finale aired in 2018, Animal Planet quietly canceled the show. No announcement heralded its end, and the promised evidence never materialized. A 3-year silence followed before a 2-hour special landed on Discovery Plus in 2021. Advertised like a nostalgic reunion rather than a fresh expedition, the show had been shuffled behind a streaming paywall, and the momentum was gone. Instead of a triumphant return, the special felt like an epilogue, highlighting the cast's good humor but also their failure to accomplish their mission. The tragedy is that the show's collapse wasn't just a programming decision, it marked the end of a dream. For nearly a decade, these 4 hunters had gambled their careers on delivering the holy grail of cryptozoology. The cancellation meant losing steady paychecks and a national platform. Viewers moved on. Critics joked that the only thing they proved was how not to find a Sasquatch, and the cast's once fervent quest risked fading into obscurity. Those empty woods and unanswered questions would soon be joined by personal hardships that made the show's ending feel like only the first blow. When the cameras stopped rolling, the cast of Finding Bigfoot were left not with fame, but uncertainty. For James "Bobo" Fay, the show's end meant returning to Eureka, California, and working on commercial fishing boats and odd jobs to get by. Bigfoot research doesn't pay a salary. His income from the show had been his only steady support. He still co-hosts a podcast with Cliff Barackman, but a Bigfoot podcast doesn't pay the bills. Bobo's dramatic weight loss after filming sparked rumors that he was sick. In reality, he said his slimmer look came from exercise and a healthier lifestyle. The speculation underscores how even personal changes become fodder for gossip when you're tethered to a fringe hobby. Cliff faced the end of the show differently. Rather than return to his previous life, he doubled down on Sasquatch. In 2019, he and his wife opened the North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon. The museum displays casts of footprints, audio recordings, and film clips, and offers tours and even weddings. It keeps the legend alive but depends heavily on tourism, an unstable source of income for a niche subject. These reinventions underline a tragic reality. The cast loved their work, but there is no mainstream career path for tracking an unproven hominid. Without television paychecks, each hunter must scramble for stability, hauling nets on fishing boats, running small museums, or talking into microphones for free. They persist because Bigfoot is a calling, but passion doesn't guarantee security. For Bobo, Cliff, and the others, life after the cameras means trading stardom for side gigs while trying to keep a fading dream alive. There's an irony in devoting your life to proving a creature exists. Once the cameras stop, the world forgets. The cast's dedication remains unchanged, but without the show, their hunt talent fades into obscurity. The end of Finding Bigfoot did not just mark a professional setback, it thrust the cast into a new kind of spotlight. Without the show's platform, they became fair game for rumors and online mockery. Most of the speculation focused on James "Bobo" Fay, whose dramatic weight loss between the early seasons and his later appearances startled viewers. Social media posts accused him of being gravely ill or even dying, some claiming he had cancer or that Bigfoot had cursed him. In reality, Bobo had embarked on a healthier lifestyle. He took up exercise, changed his diet, and shaved his hair. But in the echo chamber of the internet, his personal transformation morphed into feverish gossip. The same forums that once debated Sasquatch footprints now argued over whether Bobo was on his deathbed. For a man who still fishes to pay his bills, it must have been surreal to read strangers declare him dead. The cruelty extended beyond health rumors. Matt Moneymaker, the founder of the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization and the show's alpha personality, became a lightning rod for critics. Skeptics labeled him a fraud for charging membership fees to attend expeditions and for promising evidence that never materialized. An ongoing feud with Canadian filmmaker Todd Standing spilled into the open when Standing accused Moneymaker of selling snake oil and running a staged television show. Moneymaker fired back by comparing Standing to notorious hoaxers. The argument exposed the wider schisms within the Bigfoot community. Researchers, who should be united by a shared passion, instead attack each other's methods and motives. Those conflicts erode trust, and the public sees only infighting rather than cooperation. Brunei Holland, the show's only skeptic and a biologist by training, faced her own form of hostility. Some Bigfoot enthusiasts labeled her a traitor for doubting eyewitness accounts, while skeptics accused her of lending scientific credibility to pseudoscience. Cliff Barackman kept a lower profile, but still endures jabs about operating a museum to a myth. In online comments and conspiracy forums, the cast members' love of cryptids is treated as evidence of gullibility or opportunism. Few acknowledge the genuine curiosity that drives them. Instead, they are caricatured as punchlines. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of this rumor mill is that it distracts from the real dangers and sacrifices involved in field research. When strangers obsess over Bobo's waistline or hurl insults at Moneymaker, they ignore the months spent hiking through remote wilderness, the nights in freezing tents, and the lost weekends chasing faint reports. The cast members have devoted their adult lives to a quest that most scientists dismiss. That commitment has cost them steady work, strained personal relationships, and, in some cases, their physical safety. Yet online chatter reduces those sacrifices to gossip fodder. The internet's appetite for scandal means that instead of celebrating resilience, it magnifies human imperfections. For the Finding Bigfoot cast, coping with health rumors and digital harassment became an unexpected part of the job. They wanted to prove Bigfoot was real. Instead, they had to prove they were still alive. For the Finding Bigfoot cast, the search for an elusive creature has always carried a weight beyond television ratings. They are part of a small, close-knit community that bonds over long nights in the woods. When tragedy strikes that community, it hits hard. During the show's run, James "Bobo" Fay lost a dear friend and fellow Bigfooter named Manuel Solorio. In January 2012, Solorio, aged only 48, suffered a suspected heart attack while camping alone in the Pacific Northwest. He was out Bigfooting, following the same passion that had forged his friendship with Bobo. Years earlier, Solorio had witnessed a Sasquatch during a live radio broadcast with Bobo and researcher John Freitas. His death shocked the community. Bobo later said, "The loss served as a reminder that searching for Bigfoot is not just about thrills. It involves real risks, including isolation, extreme weather, and underlying health conditions." That same year, another tragedy struck when 17-year-old Riley Rawlins, the son of Bigfoot researcher Monica Rawlins, was killed in a car accident after a driver ran a red light. Though not directly linked to the show, Riley's death reverberated through Bigfoot circles. He had attended expeditions and shared his mother's passion, and his passing underscored how fragile life can be. These losses weighed heavily on the cast. As they continued filming, they carried memories of friends who would never again walk beside them in the forest. The dangers of the hunt became tragically clear again in December 2024, when 2 Oregon men died while searching for Bigfoot in remote Washington forests. After they failed to return on Christmas Eve, a 3-day search found their bodies near a wilderness road. Authorities ruled their deaths the result of exposure and poor preparation. The men had ventured into snowbound terrain without adequate clothing or supplies. Their story made national headlines because they perished chasing a creature many scientists insist does not exist. Critics called their deaths a senseless waste, but for the cast of Finding Bigfoot, it was a sobering reminder. The pursuit that defines their lives can be fatal. They have spent countless nights in similar conditions, often relying only on experience and intuition to stay safe. The tragedy reinforced the need for caution and preparation, and it underscored why some family members worry about them whenever they head into the wilderness. Yet death does not always come from the elements. In September 2025, the Bigfoot community lost perhaps its most respected scientist, Dr. Jeff Meldrum. A professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University, Meldrum lent academic credibility to the search for Sasquatch. He studied footprint casts, analyzed gait patterns, and engaged skeptics with evidence and logic. After a brief battle with brain cancer, he died at 67, leaving a void in both academia and the community of researchers who looked to him for guidance. For the Finding Bigfoot cast, his death was a personal blow as well. Meldrum had been a guest on the show and a mentor to Cliff Barackman, encouraging him to maintain rigorous standards when collecting evidence. Without Meldrum's voice, the gap between amateur enthusiasts and mainstream scientists widens. These tragedies illustrate how heavy the cost of pursuing Bigfoot can be. Friends die suddenly, accidents rob families of loved ones, and respected scientists succumb to illness. Every loss ripples outward. The cast must process grief while continuing to chase a creature that remains unproven. Each new expedition becomes both a tribute to those who are gone and a test of their own resilience. They cannot bring back Manuel Solorio, Riley Rawlins, the 2 Oregon hunters, or Dr. Meldrum, but they can honor them by pressing on. There is tragedy in this dedication too. To be defined by a search that may never succeed means living with perpetual uncertainty. For the Finding Bigfoot cast, that uncertainty is compounded by the knowledge that some of their comrades have already paid the ultimate price. By the time Finding Bigfoot went off the air, the show had become a punchline in popular culture. Late-night comedians joked that a program promising to uncover a giant ape had done nothing but chase shadows. South Park mocked the series in an episode that depicted the team as bumbling buffoons. Critics wrote that the show was a symptom of America's appetite for reality TV nonsense, a weekly reminder that cable networks would film anything if it drew viewers. Even fans often tuned in more for the banter and mishaps than for any expectation of evidence. The catchphrases of wood knocks, squatchy vibes, and thermal hits entered memes. For the cast, it was hard to ignore that their life's work had been reduced to punchlines. The ridicule wasn't merely for entertainment, it cut deeper. To scientists and skeptics, the show exemplified pseudoscience. Instead of controlled studies or rigorous methodology, viewers saw the cast following anecdotal reports, using ambiguous sounds as evidence and rarely applying standard wildlife biology techniques. Academic journals and skeptic magazines criticized the program for conflating speculation with fact, arguing it misled audiences about the nature of scientific inquiry. Universities sometimes used Finding Bigfoot as a cautionary tale in critical thinking classes. Here is how not to conduct research. This stigma bled into the cast's personal reputation. Ranai Holland, despite being a trained biologist, found that her association with the show made some colleagues question her seriousness as a scientist. Cliff Barackman, who had built a career around studying studying footprints and hair samples, discovered that mainstream science dismissed him as an enthusiast at best, a crank at worst. The pseudoscience label also had economic consequences. Sponsorships and speaking engagements dried up when companies feared backlash for endorsing fringe beliefs. Libraries that once hosted Bigfoot lectures withdrew invitations after complaints that they were promoting misinformation. Even the North American Bigfoot Center in Oregon encountered zoning battles and protests from locals who felt the museum exploited myths rather than educating. The cast learned that when you base your career on a creature most scholars deem imaginary, you risk being shut out of serious discourse. Perhaps most painful was the realization that public mockery can deter younger generations from taking up the search. Bobo, Matt, Ranae, and Cliff often speak about inspiring children to appreciate wilderness and follow their curiosity. But when Bigfoot research is framed as a joke, potential future researchers turn away. The cast endures jokes and skepticism because they believe the truth matters. But the ridicule fosters a culture where valid questions about wildlife and unexplained phenomena are dismissed outright. The irony is profound. A show meant to promote curiosity became a cultural shorthand for gullibility. That stigma is a burden they will carry long after the cameras stop. While ridicule from outsiders is difficult, the conflict within the Bigfoot community can be even more bitter. Finding Bigfoot cast members often found themselves embroiled in feuds with rival shows and fellow researchers. The most public spat erupted with the cast of the series Mountain Monsters. In 2015, Matt Moneymaker tweeted that Mountain Monsters was a scripted, fictional show and that its hunters were actors. The Ames team fired back, calling Finding Bigfoot the real hoax. The feud escalated, with both sides hurling insults on social media. Fans watched as cryptozoologists, who claimed to seek truth, instead attacked each other's integrity. The fight might have been entertaining to onlookers, but for those dedicated to the field, it was disheartening. Infighting damaged credibility and divided a community that was already marginalized. The conflicts weren't confined to social media. Over the years, Moneymaker has faced accusations of mismanaging expeditions and prioritizing profits over research. In one notable incident, a Florida man filed a defamation lawsuit against Moneymaker and a Bigfoot news site, alleging he had been insulted and falsely portrayed after attending a BFRO expedition. The case dredged up claims that the BFRO charged high fees for expeditions, promised evidence and delivered little, and dismissed dissenters as bad for business. Moneymaker and his supporters argued that he had only been protecting participants from unsafe behavior. Regardless of the truth, the case highlighted the tensions between commercial expedition organizers and participants who felt exploited. These controversies were amplified by the broader trend of Bigfoot entertainment. Shows like Expedition Bigfoot, Finding Monsters, and various YouTube channels sprang up to compete. Each program had its own approach to evidence, and they often criticized one another to stand out. Some accused others of faking footage or planting audio. Rumors swirled that certain cast members in multiple shows were secretly working together to stage dramatic encounters. Even within the Finding Bigfoot team, there were whispers of tension. Fans on forums speculated that Matt and Ranae clashed over methods, though the cast publicly downplayed any friction. In private, some researchers expressed frustration that sensationalism had eclipsed genuine fieldwork. They worried that the race for ratings turned Bigfoot research into reality television wrestling, complete with staged rivalries and contrived drama. The fracturing of the community isn't just a PR problem, it has emotional consequences. Many Bigfoot enthusiasts, including the Finding Bigfoot cast, entered this pursuit because they believed collaboration would bring them closer to answers. Instead, they have seen friendships end and alliances crumble over disagreements about evidence and ethics. The constant bickering discourages serious academics from getting involved. It also leaves the cast feeling isolated within their own passion. When your life's work is dismissed by mainstream science and attacked by your peers, discouragement creeps in. The tragedy is not just that Bigfoot remains unfound, it's that the search has fractured the community that cares most about it. Mending these divides may be the cast's greatest challenge yet. Without unity, the dream of proving Sasquatch's existence grows ever more remote. After the cameras stopped, the cast refused to fade away. Cliff Barackman poured his savings into a small museum and research hub in Oregon, displaying footprint casts and recordings, and hosting talks and summer camps. The North American Bigfoot Center keeps the legend alive and funds new outings. He and Bobo launched a podcast that interviews witnesses and researchers, building a community that no longer depends on network schedules. Listeners call in with stories and questions, creating a dialogue that television never allowed. They attend conventions and festivals, meeting fans who still believe and selling casts to support expeditions. Renai Holland embraced science outreach, telling students that skepticism and curiosity can coexist. Matt Moneymaker continues guiding paid expeditions, controversial yet popular with people eager to experience the hunt. Together, they show that passion can survive ridicule by shifting to podcasts, museums, and lectures. Resilience itself becomes their legacy. Yet the future is uncertain. Mainstream interest has moved on, and technology has failed to turn up evidence. Science remains unconvinced. The death of Dr. Jeff Meldrum removed a bridge to academia. The cast are older now, feeling the physical toll of decades in the field. Knees ache, hearing fades. Families ask when the chase will end. Bigfoot itself is becoming folklore rather than frontier possibility. Younger audiences see Sasquatch as a meme, and streaming platforms favor flashier shows. Without proof, the environmental argument for protecting hypothetical habitats rings hollow. A core of believers persists, but as the world focuses on climate change, biodiversity loss, and pandemics, the cast must face that their life's work may remain unresolved and increasingly irrelevant. Loving a mystery that the wider world may have outgrown is its own kind of tragedy. Each season brings hope,